This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, a reflection back on what was a very dry summer for some and a cleanup of the harvest. Hello, everyone. We welcome you here to the broadcast this weekend. Mr. Pearson alongside me. I don't know about next week, though. You may be traveling in some wintry weather from what I hear.
I may be. We're going to be talking to Greg in just a little bit. I'll be up in Montana next week, and it sounds like weather could get hairy up that direction.
He'll go into detail on that forecast to be sure. We've been talking with folks about how this season turned out for them. We were in Northeast Missouri just a few days ago. Jason Pollard sat down with us. He's with BASF. I asked him about that region there, to the west of Hannibal and Quincy, as you go on into Northeast Missouri around the community of Shelbina, and he shared with us.
It was overall a really good growing season. The months we got the crop in at decent time. April, May was planted pretty normal for us. We got into June and July. We had a good amount of rain. We get on to the first week of August. We start getting dry. August was pretty dry. September we really got pretty dry. So the later half of the year, we did get pretty dry. Some people have just picked up some rain here recently, but it was spotty, right? I mean, there was certain spots along this corridor, along 36, that did pick up some rain at some different times in the summer. But overall, the crop has been excellent. I think better than what guys expected. Corn has been really good. Soybean yields have been pretty good for the most part. There was a couple wind events that happened in my northern part of the county. It was pretty isolated. Had some straight line winds that come in, but overall, 22 was a great season for most guys, and I think yields were good, and commodity prices are pretty decent. So I think overall, it was one of the growing seasons that was fun. I mean, things worked out well, and enjoyed a lot of it. So, yeah.
A little more dryness than maybe you would have liked to have seen in August. Do you think you took the top off the yield at all?
I believe we took the top end out of the beans. I think those guys, I am seeing a significant difference in those guys that did spray fungicide. It allowed those beans to hang on a little longer than what maybe some of those that weren't treated did. And so, but I do think we lost some top end yield potential, no doubt. We tried to get that August rain to try and finish those beans. I don't think they finished all the way to the top like they normally would, and maybe seed size was a little smaller, losing some seed weight. But overall, I thought they hung on really well, and have been fairly surprised at some of the soybean yields we've been seeing come out this fall.
I mean, we sometimes hear about the importance of good plant health toward the end of the growing season in beans, and you saw that enhanced by fungicide usage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It definitely paid again for growers this year, and yeah, it's been consistent when we do that application. Even if we get into those droughtier, stressier periods, you just see that crop tend to want to be able to fight and hang on a little longer. And soybeans, they kind of like to lay down and go down. You know, they kind of like to lay down if you don't watch them. And so anytime you can keep them pumped up a little bit and give you just a few more weeks or so to fill those pods, and that's a good thing. And so I think we saw that this year on those guys that treated those acres.
Jason Pollard is located at Leonard, Missouri. Then we were along the East Coast this week in Maryland and Delaware, Willand Family Farms, where R.C. Willand shared a few comments with us about the season they'd had. It was too dry at times, too hot at times, and yet some of the best yields ever, if not the best.
Well, it started out with a lot of optimism. Certainly the prices were where they were. We were looking at $16 beans and $8 corn. So it was an exciting start to the year, had a lot of promise, but certainly when we began to, we had to begin in the fall of 2021 to just begin to line up some of our inputs, especially the biologicals, the micronutrients. We even reached out as far as California to try to locate micronutrients that we're going to need in our operation. So the challenge there was the financial side, being able to balance what our inputs were going to be and costs were going to be, and what our expected sales prices were going to be. As it worked out, it was an extremely variable year. We had generally good planting conditions, probably the best we've had in 3 or 4 years here on our farm. And we got the crop in good timing for the most part. The challenge then after that was we did get quite a bit of rainfall early on in the season. And we irrigate like 95% of our production, which is helpful. But we had extreme temperatures that really challenged us. The nighttime temperatures were very high. Unlike the Midwest where you tend to cool down, we don't cool down much at nighttime. We also have very high humidity levels here, one of the most difficult areas of the country, maybe of the world, to grow corn just from a disease standpoint. But we have good products to use, and through Total Acre, we've been able to evaluate not just our farm, but 750 operations around the country and how successful they've been with some of those input costs and deciding on which ones to use. We hit a period in late July, early August, where it did not rain for 4 to 5 weeks at all. Temperatures were extreme, and we did lose yield because of temperature, we think. Even though we were able to provide enough water for the crop, just temperatures were difficult to manage in that time frame. And then it started to rain when we got ready to harvest. So it's prolonged the harvest a little bit, but it's been a very good season overall. We probably had our largest production numbers this year ever. And that's attributed to just maybe being able to cross all the T's and dot all the I's at the right time.
We enjoyed visiting with R.C. Willen and the other boys in the Willen family as we stopped there this week along the Delaware-Maryland state line. Oh, by the way, if you ever get a flat tire on their farm, you are in good hands, as we learned this past week.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. Now it's time to take a look at the markets. Joining us this week is Walter Kunish, Senior Commodity Strategist with HTS Commodities. Walter, we continue to see fundamentals move the grain market, but this week we also saw big macro economy moves. What did the Federal Reserve do?
Hey, good morning. Good to see everybody. Thanks for having me back. This week was a tumultuous week for the U.S. economy, and the biggest event this week down in Washington was the Federal Reserve Bank rose interest rates, cut its overnight lending rate by 75 basis points. But what really came out of that meeting was the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, Jay Powell, committed to not only fighting inflation, but actively using monetary policy or continuing to raise interest rates throughout the course of the year to help control inflation.
Now, Walter, we've seen higher interest rates put some strength behind the U.S. dollar, make it a little harder for American ag exports to compete. Does this raise that risk even further?
It does, and it's, that's a great word, risks. I think, as the Federal Reserve continues to raise rates, the risks are prevalent on two fronts. First, we think it's going to become more expensive for rural America, for the farm economy to procure their inputs and to also to conduct business. We see operating costs, loan costs starting to increase. But at the same time, you're right, it's also about the risk to the U.S. dollar. Earlier this week, the dollar, after the Fed decision, the dollar continued to strengthen. And what that does is that it makes U.S. agricultural exports more expensive at the port relative to other major exporters like Canada, Brazil, Argentina, the European Union. And all this comes together, and it creates a series of headwinds for the U.S. The U.S. farmer operating costs go up, but also, too, as the strength of the dollar rises, U.S. agricultural exports get less competitive, which has the ability to slow the movement down and pressure upstream cash prices.
Walter, let's talk about exports so far this season. This fall, how have corn exports been running compared to usual?
They have been running slow. If there was ever a word to describe corn exports, it would be slow and lethargic. And that's kind of a function of, we see two major variables. Number one, like we just mentioned, strength of the U.S. dollar. The strength of the U.S. dollar is forcing those global end users who have the option to look for other feed inputs from other countries. And they're actively doing that. And the USDA data is showing that that the world end user, corn end user, is looking for feed inputs and buying those feed inputs from other countries. And we believe that using the USDA's weekly sales export data, that the U.S. corn export program is vulnerable. We believe that it is subject to further reductions.
Walter, thinking of further reductions, we've had a lot of concern about yield in this year's corn production. Next year, we get the supply and demand estimates from USDA. Do you anticipate any yield adjustments on that report?
Traditionally, the November WASDE report can be a fairly benign or not a very, we don't believe that the USDA will make or has a real base case to make an extreme or to really modify either corn or soybean yields. But what we're looking for is, again, we're looking at the demand side, like we mentioned on the export side. Corn exports have been lethargic, so have wheat. The USDA did mark down or did reduce both wheat and corn exports in the October WASDE. So while we don't necessarily think that the USDA has a case to further adjust exports, we are going to be watching the demand side of the equation on next week's report.
All right, lots ahead, lots going on the global scene. We'll be back for more with Walter when This Week in Agribusiness returns. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. Welcome back. We're discussing the markets with Walter Kunish of HTS Commodities. And Walter, one of the big stories this past week was the volatility in the wheat market. Russia was making some headlines. What happened?
Yeah, there's more volatility in wheat this week than there is a roller coaster at the county fair. What happened is that Russia and Ukraine earlier this year, back in late July, signed an agreement that allowed for the free passage of wheat to leave Ukraine ports and enter into kind of the world marketplace. And on Sunday night, Russia said they were backing out of that agreement. On Monday, they said they were back in the agreement. Then they said they were back out. And earlier this week, they said they were back in. So what that did is it caused, kind of panic in the world wheat futures markets. U.S. wheat was going to catch a bid, and then it caused prices to go up. Russia came back in, said they were going to guarantee the safe passage. Wheat goes down. So again, roller coaster action in wheat.
It is indeed, Walter. And when you look at the global wheat environment right now, what other factors are you watching besides those in Eastern Europe?
Well, we're also closely monitoring what's the hydrological conditions and the weather in Argentina. The northern portion of Argentina has been experiencing an acute drought that's not as protracted like the southwestern U.S. But what that dryness is doing in Argentina is that it's causing estimated reductions in wheat production for this year. We've seen estimates down anywhere from 12 to 17% year over year. And it's also causing, too, not just from wheat, it's impacting the regular crop rotation, meaning that, what we're hearing out of the southern hemisphere is that Argentina may plant less corn and more soybeans.
Interesting, Walter. The conversation is turning to beans out of South America more broadly. Looking at Brazil and Argentina, how does that crop look?
Right now, we're not seeing any problems with the Brazilian crops. There seems to be the key growing regions in Brazil appear to be getting timely precipitation. It also seems like areas of Argentina, like I mentioned, despite the fact that the country is in a drought state, or those key growing areas for corn, beans, and wheat are experiencing that dryness. There is periodic rains, but overall, it seems to be like there's again kind of the world is waiting and watching for big corn crops in Brazil and big soybean crops out of both Argentina and Brazil.
Well, Walter, while we've got you, let's take our focus over to the livestock markets. We've had a lot of enthusiasm building in the cattle market as those numbers have started to come down of overall cattle supply. Where does that move the market from here in your mind?
We at HTS, when we talk with our cattle contacts, whether they're kind of the ranchers, a feedlot, or downstream kind of at the packers, we are seeing again just that real tightness throughout the cattle supply chain, and the numbers are certainly showing it. They're coming up in the placements at the feedlot level. The last cattle on feed report from October showed that with the exception of Nebraska, placements in Kansas and Texas are continuing to contract year over year. And what we believe is going to happen and further add for price support throughout the cattle the cattle supply chain is that as the Southwest, as the Panhandle starts to experience some rain, and we see it happening, is that those ranchers, cow-calf producers are going to leave the cattle on the grass a little bit longer, which will continue to support prices.
All right, lots to watch there in the cattle market. Glad to hear there's a bullish sense of optimism in that sector. A lot of those cattle producers could use it. Walter Kunish, Senior Commodity Strategist with HTS Commodities. Thanks for joining us this week.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
This time of year, farmers are using technology in the field, but Max, they're also using it at home, sometimes at the bin site.
Oh man, it used to be an arduous task. Well, I still know some growers that spend the night out there babysitting the drying operation. It has gotten a little bit less onerous because of the technology, as Chad Colby shares with us.
Max, you're absolutely right. There's so much sophistication in handling grain. Certainly, we're familiar with the harvest side of it, but that's just the start. Once you get that grain out of the field, certainly you got to manage it properly after. At the Farm Progress Show, I noticed a lot more technology is moving down the path of automation around our grain dryers. And one of my good friends, Randy Oberle's system, as you can see right here, is pretty sophisticated. He put it in about 10 years ago, and I know Randy's always been kind of on the cutting edge. He's got the Watchdog system on this drying operation that he's been using for years, and it works very well. And the key with this is keeping ahead of the game, especially in the heart of the season when moisture's dropping in the field, or maybe you change that variety and you get that 2 or 3 point spike in drying. If you have your own drying system, you're very familiar with this. I know on our farm growing up, we didn't have anything as sophisticated as this, and it was always a constant battle to make sure you didn't go too far. In Randy's system, as you can see here, he has the ability to VPN in or log in remotely. And what you're looking at is that screen on the back. That's his laptop. I was there with my camera recording it. And then you can see up in the right-hand corner, that's him logging in via his cell phone, and he's going to make adjustments to his dryer right here in real time. You'll see he's going to click on temperature, and you can see he's going to change that temperature from 215 down to 210. I think the thing to understand is there's a lot of people, Randy included, is even looking at how he can advance this system, because with the availability of higher speed internet, and whether that's better Wi-Fi networks or better cell phones, all those things, it's giving us all a lot more options on what we can do. And that kind of brings me back to my first point. At the Farm Progress Show, the guys at GSI, in fact, they've got a new system, and it got Randy's attention because he's already looking into it. It's definitely like any other technology today. There's so many new enhancements to make you better aware of what's going on. You can see right here, it's got a series of cables in the bend to keep an eye on the moisture, and even some great automation around your fans. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
We've come light years, to be sure, and advancing the technology right there at the drying operation, an important part of the process to bring that moisture level down where it needs to be from sometimes a very high level in the field. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. If you're a regular viewer, you know there are some folks upon whom we regularly rely to get information about what's happening in various parts of the United States. One of those is Joe Gill, farm broadcaster at KASM in Minnesota, and also president-elect of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. Joe, how have you been?
Max, we're doing great. It's been such an ideal fall here in this area and many parts of the country.
It has been remarkable to see just how much field work was accomplished, how beautiful the leaves have been on the trees across such a wide geography. Did harvest get accomplished in a timely manner in your part of the world, in Minnesota?
You know, harvest was outstanding, Max. I'd say pretty much all complete right now, just a little bit of corn out there, but a lot of folks I talk to who are out combining corn or whatever it may be, it's going, straight to the co-op. They don't have to do any sort of dry down. I guess that's a benefit of not seeing any rain, kind of being in a drought area. So a lot of folks really, nothing hindering. We had 2 minor frosts, but otherwise nothing major to really get in the way. And right now we got a lot of folks baling corn straw, so that bedding for the winter, that's going to be an added plus.
You mentioned drought. I assume you need to catch up on some moisture ahead of the next growing season. Is that right?
Yes, we could use a good old-fashioned Minnesota winter, I think, just to get some of that moisture back here. Last couple of months, I would say, conservatively under 5 total inches, maybe 4 inches since September, maybe late August. Pastures for those cattle that were grazing actually did hang in there pretty decent, but just overall for the soil and such, we could use some more rain. You can see some of these small streams and rivers very low. And of course, that's kind of a side note to everybody talking about the Mississippi and that being low as well.
You post on a regular basis some of the results at sale barns there in the area. Share with us what you've been seeing.
You know, Max, I wish I had a truckload of Black Angus feeders weighing 500 pounds right now. Watching a couple sales yesterday, well over $2. Seeing some of those black cattle 2.5 up to 250. So you're looking at a steer weighing 350, 375. You're paying $1,000 a head. It's just unreal. And in this area too, where we still have a lot of dairy concentrated, a lot of added value for our dairy farmers as they're using Angus genetics and getting these Angus crossbred calves, which most of the time will bring triple the price of a straight up Holstein bull calf.
You know, it's interesting to hear. I knew there was some dairy in your area, still quite a few family operations there. And what would be the typical size?
Yeah, dairy is still the backbone of our, we're the biggest dairy county here in the state and still the backbone of our general area. It's hard to measure that average size because I can go a mile down one road and there's a person who milks 58 cows. I can go 3 miles to my north and there's a farm with 2,000 cows. So I see everything from stanchion milking to somebody who's got a robot and 64 cows. So it still varies a lot. It kind of depends upon where you go. There's a nice mixture, but a lot of people are starting to edge closer to that technology, especially the robots, which can save on the labor, which has been an issue, and also just give you a little more freedom as well as a dairy farmer.
And to maybe encourage a younger generation of dairy men and women to come back to the farm. Those who certainly want to be able to take a vacation, maybe the kind that their parents or grandparents couldn't take, right, Joe?
Yeah, the day of hearing the dairy farmers saying, you know what, Max, I haven't missed a milking in 38 years. Well, I don't think you're ever going to hear that anymore. And kids nowadays, like my own, boy, they love technology. So if you can, take agriculture, toss in that nugget of technology, I think it's going to pique more interest as well.
A robotic milker is pretty pricey. What is the price tag? $250,000 or so?
I'd say you're right in the ballpark right there. I just spoke to a young lady. It was her and her husband who were talking about getting out of dairy farming. They're ready to retire, but they had kids who wanted to milk cows. Well, we kind of lost contact. A couple of weeks later, she said, look what came in the yard today, and it was 4 robotic milkers. So she said, we were at the point to, all right, let's step away, we're done. Or do we jump back in, help the next generation? They elected to do that, and she seems pretty excited to do it.
That's a neat story. Looking ahead, our meeting of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting is just a few days away. You'll be taking over the helm of that group of ours, and you help plan this meeting. What can members look forward to when they get together in Kansas City, Joe?
It's going to be a great meeting once again, and once again being held in Kansas City, where it's been for many years. And this year, we're really going to have a chance to focus on many topics that we discuss on a daily basis. We're going to be talking taxes and estate. I know a lot of farmers have issues and discussions there. We're going to talk technology, whether it's in the farm tractor cab or in your truck or your car. We're going to talk about that. We're going to be gathering right after the election. So we're going to also get that input on, well, what happened? How is that going to affect us? How is it going to affect agriculture? How is it going to affect the farm bill? So that's just kind of scratching the surface, but a lot of topics that we're all well aware of.
It's a great bunch. We look forward to getting together. We look forward to your leadership, sir. Thanks for taking the time to join us this weekend.
Thanks, Max.
Joe Gill, he's on the radio, KASM in Minnesota, and one of our officers of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, soon to take over the presidency. There's more coming up here on this weekend's broadcast. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Max, you were out on the road this past week. Where'd you go?
Well, we were in poultry country and a big grain producing area too. We were in Maryland and Delaware, not far from the Atlantic Ocean, just about 30 miles from the coast. And as I was there, I was reminded of the fact that we've been watching these poultry industry problems closely. The disease concerns because once again, this season, the high path avian influenza has reared its ugly head once more.
That's right, Max. HPAI remains a concern heading into this winter, but researchers now have some new data. For the first time in North America, an infected bird with HPAI was tracked by researchers. Joining us now is the co-author of the study of this wild bird, Jeffrey Sullivan with the U.S. Geological Survey. And Jeffrey, what makes it so hard to track a wild bird with HPAI?
Well, there's a lot of different factors that go into making this just as complicated as it is, and why we've had issues doing this up to present. The first of those is just the limited opportunities within the United States. We haven't had very many major HPAI outbreaks in the past, which means that there have been fewer opportunities to get those birds. And that's a great thing for us here, but it is definitely a challenge. One of the other factors is that while this is a major issue, on the scale of all of the nation's wild birds, the prevalence rates are such that, and not every transmitter you're going to put out is going to have a bird that might become infected. And finally, the high cost of transmitters in and of themselves, right? Most of these studies that are going on are doing 20 or 30 birds. And at any given site, to get an infected bird is a fairly rare instance. And this is the first time that all of that has come together at one time when a disease sample was taken for us to know that that was in fact infected.
So let's talk through how this infected bird behaved. Jeffrey, if you would tell us, what kind of bird is it? And then how did you notice its actions changing once you were aware that it was infected?
Sure. So we'll start off that this was a lesser scaup captured in the Chesapeake Bay of Maryland as part of an ongoing collaborative study with Maryland Department of Natural Resources and the University of Delaware, where they were doing their own study looking at lesser scaup wintering ecology there in the Chesapeake Bay. And we were able to collaborate with them and take disease samples from the birds that they were already capturing and tagging for their own work, right? Really that collaborative science effort that is so important to these larger projects. And the bird was behaving perfectly normally when it was brought in for tagging, right? There was nothing unusual about this bird. It was acting just like all of the other conspecifics in the study. However, after release, we get the results back a few weeks later and then start to look at the data and go, oh, okay, this is different. This bird was expressing much reduced movements in the wild. So even though it wasn't expressing anything behaviorally in the lab, it was showing, half of the level of hourly movements that we were seeing from other wild birds tagged even on the exact same day.
So, Jeffrey, if this wild bird is behaving differently, is this going to change the questions researchers ask in securing poultry facilities?
That's still to be determined a little bit. The real implication of this study is how we integrate water bird movement into our transmission models, right? So if we can start to predict how the virus might spread across space and time by integrating the movements of the wild birds.
All right. All of these things are works in progress. U.S. Geological Survey continuing to do work to track HPAI throughout the country. Jeffrey Sullivan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Many of us will be able to say, oh, that fall of 22 was so pretty. We noticed that in the past week wherever we were. North Carolina, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, and Missouri also. That's over now.
Yep.
In a big way for some folks.
That's right. With wind-driven moisture as the week wears on into the plains and western corn belt. And, the dryness and drought often has certainly an integral factor in trying to figure out how much color we get. Dry, drought-ridden seasons, sometimes it's not spectacular out there. So a little different look and feel to the tree scene into the plains and the Midwest and the southeastern states, as it is in the Pacific Northwest. You don't see this here by early to middle parts of November. Mid-winter style troughiness making its way over the Pacific Northwest, northern Rockies. One weather system here. Yes, he said this right. Bitter cold, sub-zero cold at night, winter-type cold, and another weather system much stronger with a really solid and complete coverage rainfall. Lowest elevations, higher peaks will be measuring the snow by the feet or more. You want a drought relief? You got it, but heads up livestock operations. Very cold air, big sky country. Organized snows middle to late parts of the week. Black Hills on northward into the Canadian Prairie, and another weather system coming ashore into the Pacific Northwest. The southern extension of all that weather busyness, yeah, it's a deep trough carving, digging its way into the southwestern parts of the country. Showers and thunderstorms. Good news, but maybe severe, would you believe? But again, some rainfall for the wheat fields here. They're struggling. Note the colder air and shower activity all the way down into the LA Basin, central and southern Sacramento valleys. We'll get some retrogression backing up other weather systems as a strong upper air trough carves its way into the southwestern part of the country. Here's new low pressure here, snow in the mountains, and showers and thunderstorms max across the winter wheat fields from Nebraska, Kansas on southward. Drought relief, but maybe severe weather potential as well.
Oh my. As we go on into the eastern plains and the Midwest, what's the timetable for that stuff to get there?
Probably as you get into areas of the eastern Corn Belt, maybe not till the upcoming weekend, but early to middle parts of the week, we're off and running to the races from the Arrowhead of Minnesota, Nebraska Panhandle. Here's this warm sector stuff here, like we had here the past week to 10 days to 2 weeks. It's still playing out here. Dry high pressure, some opportunity for outdoor work and field work and harvest. Northern and eastern Corn Belt locales. Middle to late parts of the week, we get these systems strung out in this powerful southwest to northeast upper level jet stream wind flow from snow up north of the Sioux, snow across the Dakotas into Montana and Wyoming, to showers and thunderstorms here across the areas of the Corn Belt locales. Mild weather, perhaps near record-setting warm from the Ohio on southward. You wanted drought relief, but you got to wrap up harvest as well. That's the trade-off, the juggling act that you do this time of the year. But yes, it's November, and we've put a couple of these on the maps and charts here. One is the remnants of Lisa, another one forming up over the western Gulf. Ahead of them, sinking air, warmth, and summer-like environs for sections of Oklahoma, Texas. Showers and thunderstorms coming out of the southwest. Quiet weather for the Delta on east as the week wears on. Severe weather potential, yep. Heavy downpours across the Rio Grande, maybe into areas of the Delta region. Warmth and humidity into the southern plains with moisture there. Cotton harvest, Max, will be certainly interrupted in that part of the country.
Well, Rascal, you've managed to throw everything into the maps this week, it seems.
Yeah, other than the kitchen sink, but you know what? Mother Nature doesn't watch the calendar, so do the best you can out there trying to put a wrap on things. We're in good shape here, I think, generally speaking, with corn and soybean harvest. Quiet, but I'm looking set of maps and charts of the eastern Corn Belt early on in the week. Again, you get the picture. Eastern areas, we're okay. It's back out to the west, but here comes the southwest to northeast jet stream pattern. There's probably record-setting warmth, Ohio and southward, and the early vestiges of showers and thunderstorms into the northern and western Corn Belt locales. One system here, this is probably Lisa, another one forming up in the western Gulf as the week wears on. Watch the pickup on showers and thunderstorms, Gulf Coast, Florida, as summertime heat continues on into parts of the southern plains.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. From his earlier comments, it sounds like this will be a pivotal week. And perhaps, Greg, turn things around on that drought monitor map. I've noticed week after week after week, the dryness and drought area has expanded to the point that 85% of the continental United States was in some level of drought or dryness this past week when the report came out.
Exactly, and really a worsening of it over the past week or so, evident into that I-70 corridor, central and southern Indiana and Ohio and points on southward. Again, it's a juggling act this time of the year, trying to get harvest done in the bin, safety first, and then you want, especially this year, drought improvement, drought relief before the grounds lock up firm and tight. Well, when's the last time you saw this here? We'll get out of the picture. Tropical systems.
That is amazing.
How do you like that? Organized snows, and not just a couple of flakes. This is stuff you're going to have to deal with movement of livestock, feed, and supplies into the northern plains, high plains areas as well, big sky country. This is significant drought relief. Lower elevations, 2 to maybe 6 inches or more of rainfall anticipated. Look at the degree of moisture into the northern and central Sacramento Valley. This is the average rain snow line here. We anticipate most of the snows out north and west of the Corn Palace, but late in the week, again about 5 to 7 days out, we'll see these rains work their way out of the western Corn Belt into eastern sections. And not to mention, if these things come to fruition, these tropical systems here, there'll be substantially heavier and higher rainfall amounts. Florida, Gulf Coast area, with times of moisture up and down the eastern seaboard again, out about a week to 10 days. Action-packed and busy on the maps and charts.
That looks wild. What about the week of November 14th? How warm will it be yet in some of those places still to be warm this week?
Still that trough that we talked about in the western part of the country kind of flattening out. We don't have the big dip disappear. It's more of a little subtle one across the nation's midsection, but there's still warmth ahead of it and cooler cold air, maybe not wintertime style, but enough to generate this particular setup that we have, again, some good coverage, drought easing moisture. Hopefully you've been able to get it in the bin and where it needs to be with, again, the semblance of maybe something trying to cook over the southwestern Atlantic despite the calendar day, and the snows as well out of Yellowstone. Big sky country across the Dakotas into the Canadian Prairie. This will be showers and thunderstorms and additional drought relief for much of the central and southern plains. Corn Belt locales too.
The week of November 21st, Thanksgiving week. So you're not going to be talking about tropical activity yet.
It goes officially, technically, till the 30th of November. But at least from a temperature standpoint, yeah, it'll feel like late November and Thanksgiving for the upper Midwest. A little push of some cold air, Canadian Prairie. Here's some warmth, southeastern part of the country and over the western and southwestern sections of the country as well. Thanksgiving Day on the 24th. And it might be a little bit problematic from a travel standpoint for the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, up into the northern Great Lakes region. Rainfall again. That's why you need to get harvest done over the Ohio Valley and Corn Belt locales. And yeah, there may be some vestiges of still some lowering pressures over the southwestern Atlantic, dry in the southwest.
It sounds like the snow plow details need to be getting ready across the northern part of the country, getting those plows ready for the roads. Well, as we transition into December, what do you see?
We do see kind of a quick return on temperatures here. Look at the warmth. It's a progressive weather pattern. We still have weeks, if not a couple of months to go on La Nina. So enjoy these spells of milder air deeper into the winter and certainly springtime season. A lot of cold still showing up in the maps and charts. Lingering cool air for the eastern states. Things do begin to quiet down from a moisture standpoint, focused into the Pacific Northwest, northern Rockies, southern Canadian Prairie, and across the eastern states as well. So no need to really push it and panic about it because there's another window of opportunity right here with below average precip for much of the Corn Belt, Plain States, and points on westward with outdoor work and harvest in mind.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Well, there are some old tractors that look like they need to be painted, and some, well, maybe just don't ever get painted. We'll talk about it in Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store-Lock Tool Cabinets. Well, I can tell you it's a bright, beautiful finish on those store locks, all of them, whatever color they may be. And they function extremely well, too. Go to their website to find out more at storlock.com. Well, it's a South Dakota farm that was started 128 years ago. A tractor that was purchased on the farm 75 years ago this year. And they are celebrating a wedding anniversary, 45 years, in the Lee family in South Dakota. And here's an old tractor that was purchased in December of 1947 for that farm that was founded, well, way back 128 years ago there at Flandreau, South Dakota. But to celebrate their upcoming 45th wedding anniversary, Gordon and Mary Lee brought the family together with that old Farmall H at Elkton, South Dakota. And Gordon told me he's talked to people about maybe repainting that tractor. And there's a mixed review on whether to repaint it or to leave it as it is. Gordon said, people ask me when I'm going to paint it, and I reply, well, Grandpa bought the tractor in 1948. We have 2 more years of payments to make, and then we can repaint it. That old Farmall H from 1947 in South Dakota. Well, some of the tractors have been repainted. Some of them look brand new. Some of them are a little bit older and big iron. Here's Mark Stock's report.
Well, Max, land has been a hot topic the last couple months. We're seeing record prices on land that is being sold. Just this past week, a 38-acre tract in Lee County, Iowa, sold for $22,700 an acre. Now, in the next couple months, November and December, Big Iron Realty and Sullivan Auctioneers will be selling over 32,000 acres of farm and ranch land. Just go to our websites for all the details. Same goes for the machinery side of the business. Record prices on a lot of good quality farm equipment selling on auctions in the November 9th auction on BigIron.com features over 2,400 items. M.R.L. Schultz Farms, they are retiring from Ohio, Illinois. They've got a Case IH 9230 four-wheel drive tractor, a Case IH 1666 combine. They have a Glencoe UM 6000 mulch finisher and a John Deere 1750 8-row planter. Peter Rutt Estate and Tamara Rutt, they are from Kimball, Nebraska. They have 274 items selling on November the 9th. A 1995 Mack triaxle dump truck, a Bobcat T320 compact track loader, trucks and trailers selling as well. Plus quality hay equipment like a New Holland HW340 self-propelled swather. Plus we've got some livestock selling on November the 8th. Go to BigIron.com for all the land, equipment, and livestock selling next week.
Well, it's a busy time of year for FFAers across the country, and joining us this week is Cooper Hamlet. He's the Missouri State FFA Vice President. And Cooper, did you have a chance to make it to National Convention in Indianapolis this year?
I did. We actually just wrapped up from Indiana this past weekend.
How were the crowds, and what was the energy like?
Well, the crowds, we had about 60,000 around 60,000 members per session at the National FFA Convention and Expo this year, and the energy was very high this year. I would say for sure the first year coming back to the closest thing to normal without the masks and COVID mandates and everybody coming together, the energy was very high this year.
Cooper, as you look out for your year of service here, what are you excited about in working with students across Missouri?
What I'm excited about most is being able to see how agriculture is more diverse and different all around the state. Being able to visit different chapters of various sizes and diversity and member inclusion. I would say that what I'm looking forward to most this year is to see that and be able to help grow those different aspects and areas of agriculture within our state and our chapters.
And Missouri does have a diverse agricultural industry. Cooper, what was it that prompted you to join FFA in that first place?
So my story in starting FFA is a little different than most. I actually was kind of reluctant to get into the organization, to be honest. I was in 4-H prior to joining FFA, as most are, and I just really wanted to show my animals at the county fair. And with it being tradition of all my older brothers being part of FFA, it was a rule of the household that I had to join it to show my animals. And like I said, there was a little bit of pushback. But after that first year, my freshman year in high school in FFA, I was hooked from the beginning, that first summer.
And what was it that prompted you to get into leadership of FFA?
Like I said, that first year in FFA, what really prompted me to run for leadership positions were how those upperclassmen treated me. They saw me, even though I didn't come from the normal traditional ag background, I was kind of on and off the farm. They just really treated me nicely and kindly and helped grow me as an individual.
That community in FFA is so important. Cooper, we wish you the best as this year goes forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I thank all of you for having me on here today, Mike.
As we wrap up with you this weekend, we remind you also that conclusion of the harvest season can be kind of a stressful, dangerous time as well. And there's a lot of mental pressure, Mike, to get the job done here at the end of harvest.
There is, Max. And this year, I think especially given the high input prices and the volatility in commodity prices that every farmer's income and bottom line is based on, makes it tough looking ahead to the holiday season.
I just wanted to remind folks about that special series in Farm Futures. And some of you who get the magazine have seen this. It arrived in your mailbox. Others who go online perhaps have had the chance to access it too. But if you haven't seen this, let me give you a QR code. This code we're showing you on the screen can be used. You can take a shot of that. That will take you to that special series in Farm Futures on mental health, sponsored by FMC. We shared a visit a couple of weeks ago about that. We'll continue to visit the topic with the help of FMC in the weeks ahead. But if you have a chance, take a shot of that QR code, go to the issue in Farm Futures, and you can read more detail, how to prepare yourself and others perhaps for some of the stresses that come along. And they seem to extend from one end of the season to another, and even in times of fairly strong commodity prices, but as you pointed out, very volatile commodity prices.
They are volatile, and I think we're seeing it hit the consumer as well, Max. We're looking ahead to Thanksgiving as an industry, and those Thanksgiving costs are going to be elevated this year, largely as a result of that high-path avian influenza that we talked about earlier in the show.
Yeah, it's about time for that annual report from the American Farm Bureau every year. They report on their basket of Thanksgiving food items and what they cost, and they'll give you the price comparison to a year ago. What I hope they will do, and I have not seen this from the farm organizations in recent weeks, surprisingly, I'm comparing this era with the high inflation era of the past when we've seen a spike in food prices, and there was quite often an effort to explain the origin of the various components of food inflation. And very significant now is the fact that energy is driving costs, the cost of paper for the food industry, there's the cost of labor, there's the cost of transportation. It all greatly exceeds the cost of the raw commodity in driving up that Thanksgiving price. I wish our farm groups would be a little more strident in explaining that. They did it well in the past. Yes. I haven't seen much from them this time.
That's true, but the opportunity will be there, Max. I think these elevated prices are going to be with us for a little bit of time. Hopefully, they can make that case to the American consumer that, you know what, even though prices are higher, it's not all going in that farmer's pocket.
That's exactly right. There's a lot that's taken by the so-called middleman. Very important they are after the farm gate. We need them, but right now that's where much of the inflation is, and that should be explained.
Hopefully it will be.
Again, here's that QR code that you can take a shot of for that Farm Future series on mental health. Stay healthy, mentally and physically, the week ahead. We'll see you next week. So long, everyone. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.